just a heartfelt namaste to everyone from around the world. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to just share with you what the journey is and does, how you can go on your own internal journey, which is why I titled this webinar, Your Journey in Healing. And, you know, if you may remember from just Saturday, although it seems like eons ago already, that Robin at the end was asking, well, could I explain about cellular healing? And could I explain scientifically why it is the journey is so effective that it's being used by medical doctors and hospitals and psychiatrists and by people from all walks of life around the world, by ministries of education. And so I thought that I'd first just give you a little introduction to me, my story, and also share with you why it is it's getting the results that it's getting and how it is that cellular healing takes place. And so for those of you that are familiar with me and the work, as you know, the journey, it was in 1992, I got diagnosed with a basketball-sized tumor. And part of the gift of that whole healing journey I went through, which was quite a radical, spiritual and life-changing healing journey over a 6.5-week period of time where I healed without drugs or surgery. And from that process, that whole, immersion that I was in, I developed a process called the journey. And what we know about the cells and our emotions is that what happens is, and this is through science all over the world, that you can just Google it and Google cellular healing and emotions and the effect they have on our cells, and you'll see all the science behind it. But what science has said is when you feel a strong emotion and you repress it, it releases a quantifiable biochemistry into your bloodstream, which will go to certain cell receptors and block them and render those cells incapable of communicating with the rest of the cells in the body. And if over time illness happens, obviously it happens where the cells are blocked. Conversely, what's also known to be true is that when we feel our emotions very openly and naturally, freely like a child, and they can watch this in a laboratory, our cell receptors remain open, this biochemistry, because there is a biochemical effect with every emotion that we feel, and the biochemistry that blocks our cells does not happen when we feel our emotions naturally and freely. But the unfortunate thing is that none of us were given a manual. What do you do in the face of trauma, in the face of stress, in the face of crisis like we're in right now? And most of us, the way that we respond is that we shut down. And at the moment that we shut down, we try to run away from what we're feeling, smoke it away, drink it away, get away from it in any way that we can, watch Netflix, call a friend, almost anything to avoid feeling that emotion. And the act of avoiding that emotion and shutting it down is what releases that biochemistry into the bloodstream, going to certain cell receptors and blocking them. And so a lot of research had been done at the time that I was in 1992 diagnosed with that basketball-sized tumor. And it was going on in the field of cellular healing. And what was postulated by science at that time, which is only subsequently verified by scientists that work in American military and Russian military, is the work that we know about how cells replicate. And that was what Robin was asking for me to share with you. And what we know about the cells inside the body is that they all replicate at varying speeds. So for instance, if you've ever had a suntan, you'll notice that your tan fades after about 3 weeks' time. Why? Because your old cells slough off and are replaced by new regenerative cells. Now, all the organs, they have different times where you have an all new organ. So the stomach lining takes less than 3 days to regenerate an entirely new stomach lining. The liver takes 6 weeks for every cell to be replaced by new cells. And the one that just blows my mind are the eye cells, because your eyes feel so firm, don't they? Do you know that in less than 48 hours, in less than 2 days, you will have an all new inner eyeball? This was so impossible for my thinking mind to even conceive of. And the only way I could put it into a context was my mom had an eye operation, very common at that time, where they slit the eye open, insert a lens, put the flap back, and put a patch on. And then only a day and a half later, she could see clearly. As a matter of fact, there will not be a single molecule in your body a year from now that was here today. But scientists at that time were asking a question that no one had asked before. Well, if it's true that all our organs are constantly regenerating, all of our cells constantly being replaced by regenerative cells, why is it when you look at a liver that's riddled with cancer in January, why would it be riddled with cancer in June? Because it's replacing itself every 6 weeks. And what was postulated at that time is that stored inside the degenerative cells are these old repressed cell memories that I talked about when we first just started now. Times where we felt a strong emotion, something happened, we didn't know what to do, we shut down, and the biochemistry was released, went to our cell receptors. And that consciousness, that cell memory, what we felt at the time, is stored inside the cells. And before that cell generation dies, it passes on its programming, its consciousness, the cell memory, onto the next cell generation. So the new cell born is actually an exact replica of the previous cell generation. And this programming, it gets passed on from one cell generation to the next, to the next, to the next. And what people who had healed without drugs or surgery had in common was that through some act of grace or spontaneous event, they actually got access to that cell memory. Somehow they spontaneously got access to it. And if somehow they released the pain, the stored consciousness, they met and faced what they went through at that time, they came to some sort of clearing with it, then when the new cell was born, it was born devoid of that old programming as new regenerative cells. Now, I knew all that at the time. I was at the cutting edge of the whole personal growth, the complementary medical field. I was trained and actually certified in so many different areas and had a depth of expertise. But at the time in 1992, when it happened to me, there was no method out there. And so when I was first diagnosed by that surgeon to have this basketball-sized tumor in my uterus, it just sent me reeling, because I thought, you know what, I can understand all the science on the planet. I can understand how these cell memories get passed on from one cell generation to the next. But unless you have a method, it's no more than a bunch of statistics and a powerful vision of possibility on a page. And I'd even seen case studies of people who had healed without drugs or surgery. And the only common denominator that they could find that they had in common, Dr. Deepak Chopra, who at that time is not the master that he's become or the guru he's become today. That time he was chief surgeon general in a hospital in Boston, and he did a radical thing. As a medical doctor, he decided that he wanted to study people who had healed without drugs or surgery. Now, the reason this was so radical at that time was all of us, both in the complementary medical field and the alternative medical field and in the orthodox medical field, we were all trained the same way. Look at the symptoms that lead to ill health, that eventually lead to death. We were all focused on what makes people die. But Chopra said, we know enough about what makes people fail in healing. I want to know what makes them heal against the odds. And so he started amassing case studies of it, originally hundreds. It became thousands of case studies. There's actually a medical textbook in the United States that lists 10,000 case studies of people who have experienced what is medically called spontaneous healing, where you heal without drugs or surgery. And so Chopra wanted to know, what did they have in common? What did these people share in common? And he found that they had two qualities, and both of them were spontaneous. One was that through some act of grace or spontaneous event, they actually got access to this that he called the infinite intelligence, the part of you that makes your heart beat and your eyes shine and your hair grow. Somehow they got access to this vast field of awareness, of presence, this healing potential that is your own essence. And if somehow they spontaneously accessed this vast field of peace, of love, and they were guided by that awareness to wherever the issues were stored inside their body, and if somehow spontaneously they not only accessed the cell memories, but just somehow released what was there and faced it, then and only then, when new cells were born, they were born devoid of that old consciousness as new regenerative cells. So there I was. I knew all this. I was at the cutting edge. I'd studied even with Chopra as one of the many scientists I've studied at the time. But I got to tell you something. You can know all the science on the planet, understand how it's possible, but unless you have a method, it's nothing more than a bunch of pretty words on a page and a very powerful message of possibility. And that's where I stood. When I stood outside that surgeon's offices, and I realized that I was being invited by life to go someplace deeper than anything available in our time, deeper than what was available in medical science, deeper than what was available in complementary medicine. And so you can imagine, I realized I was going to have to throw out everything I knew and dive in someplace deeper. And that was the gift of my healing journey. I was terrified, just like anybody else who might get a diagnosis and a prognosis like mine was. And yet I knew there was being an invitation being made to uncover means for all of us. And after I healed 6.5 weeks later, I was aware that spontaneously, somehow, 3 times in that healing journey of my 6.5 weeks times, I'd spontaneously somehow open into this vast field where I felt myself to be connected and part of the whole of existence. I opened into this divine potential, this field of healing potential. And spontaneously, in opening into my own soul, into this essence that is part of all, I was guided to specific cell memories stored inside the body and went through a radical process of release, letting go, understanding. It was almost like my soul was guiding me to uncover what were the karmic lessons that I came in to learn in this lifetime. And for me, it required a depth of surrender, a depth of trust, a depth of willingness to meet whatever's there, whatever my own soul wanted to reveal to me, and to surrender wholly to releasing and feeling. And ultimately, I came to not only an understanding what had happened to me in those cell memories that I uncovered inside my body in specific cellular locations, but I came to a place of profound forgiveness. And it was forgiveness of life, forgiveness of God, forgiveness of myself, forgiveness of others for harm that I had felt been done to me. And a quite mysterious and quite magical thing happened. When I forgave, it's like I let go of a story that I've been dragging around with me since I was a little kid. You know, up until that time, I came from a family of brutal domestic violence. And of course, being a therapist, spent 8 years in therapy in New York City, which is where I'm from, that spent 8 years in therapy dealing with my abuse, both sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, and verbal and emotional abuse, all kinds of abuse. And I had thought that as a therapist and as a human being, I'd long since come to a place of acceptance inside myself. And I can remember the first journey process I did. And when I got inside that tumor and uncovered a memory of childhood abuse, of course, my, arrogant know-it-all therapist thinking myself, oh, what a load of crap. You already know about that cell memory. It can't even be the right cell memory. I mean, you went through 8 years of therapy on that, been there, done that, got the T-shirt on that cell memory. But it was like my arrogant mind had come to a place of acceptance. But my body and my soul were saying, well, Brandon, you may think you've handled it, but you haven't really. And so the journey was really born for me deciding to get real, not from a level of the mind and understanding and coming to some sort of pseudo acceptance, but from the willingness to truly open and meet the pain, and truly and wholeheartedly moving from a place of acceptance of what had happened to me in my life to wholehearted and unconditional forgiveness. And I have to tell you honestly, when it came up for me inside spontaneously that I needed to forgive, I actually didn't even have a clue how. But I knew that my soul was saying, if you really want to heal, you're going to have to forgive. And so I opened my heart. And when I attempted to forgive, it hurt. Because you see, I'd created this whole identity of Brandon, the compassionate, understanding therapist who'd come to accept and understand her violent past. And I had to step down off my own self-made pedestal and face down 30 years of pride, all dressed up as compassion. And it hurt to face down that much pride. But some part of me knew it was the key to my true healing. And when I finally opened my heart and truly forgave, I realized that that tumor had actually never been clinging to me. I had been clinging to it. And that 30 years of a blame game, dressed up as, I understand. I know what my mother went through in the Holocaust. I know she lost my sister to being drowned and all that understanding. All that fell away. And there was just unconditional love here. Unconditional forgiveness. And I realized that that tumor had never been clinging to me. I'd been clinging to it. And 30 years of a blame game, dressed up as acceptance and understanding, it was finally over. And I ended up doing 2 more processes in that 6.5-week period of time. And we all know How long does it take for the uterine lining to heal? Well, we all know what happens once a month. So 3.5 weeks after my first so-called journey process, I ended up in Cedars-Sinai Hospital, a very famous hospital in Los Angeles. I'd moved from New York to Los Angeles, to Malibu, California, and they took 43 pictures of my uterus, and the doctor, she came out and she showed me the scans, and that of a 16 years old, and she said, "Look at this. You've got the uterus, and you're nearly 40 years old, and you've got the uterus of a 16 years old." And internally, I went, yeah. But externally, being a cool New Yorker, I'd never be so uncool. And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful news." And then I did something totally uncool. I'm in this famous hospital, and I checked to see when the coast was clear and when all the corridors were clear. And I skipped all the way to the elevator. And when I stepped outside into that LA sunshine, I was overwhelmed with tears of gratitude. Gratitude just to be allowed to breathe, to feel, to smell fragrances, to see the beauty of life. And the gratitude has stayed with me since that time as one of the many gifts that tumor has given me. And after that time here, it's gotten quite warm here in our little filming studio, sorry. After that time, I put out a prayer that I would be guided to find a way to give people a step-by-step method so they could not just spontaneously, but in a step-by-step way, open into the infinite intelligence, into your own soul, into this part of you that makes your heart beat and your eyes shut and your hair grow. And at that deepest level, go on a journey inside yourself to specific cellular locations, to uncover the old cell memories there, the old programming that's there, the old issues that are stored and buried inside our bodies, and to go through this radical process of release and understanding and letting go and forgiveness, so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that. And over the next year, I worked not just with people with all kinds of physical illnesses. I worked with people with brain tumors, arthritis, eczema, asthma, heart disease, Crohn's disease, you name it. I worked with them. And of course, not every single person healed, and it's surely not after just one process, but over time, a significant portion of them healed. And of course, that's what the journey first became known for. But I also worked with people who have emotional issues that are coming up for them, where that no matter how much work they've done on it, they still are getting triggered. And issues that they may have been working on for 20, 30, 40 years are still coming up for them. And right now, with this whole pandemic, then the whole economic disaster that's happening as a result of the pandemic, then this whole powder keg that we've been in, where we've been in lockdown and we're scared, we're uncertain of our futures, we're scared for our health, our loved ones' health, we're feeling incapable, we don't know where we're going to go after lockdown. And then as we're emerging from lockdown and George Floyd gets murdered there by a policeman and the whole world erupts and something strikes a match and the powder keg has just erupted. But George Floyd did not put that issue inside of us. It was already stored in our cells, this injustice, this racial discrimination, this prejudice, this division between countries, colors, races, religions is buried even in our DNA. And all that happened is the match was lit and boom, up came our own personal response, our own personal emergence of what's really buried inside. And I just want you to do a little, just a little, I don't know, mini process here. And most of us, we've been here in Greece, and we have been over 12 weeks in lockdown. Obviously, in the last 3 weeks, it started to ease, but we're still in some version of it. Our borders are closed, and certain hotels are closed, and certain restaurants are closed. And, we're just beginning to emerge from lockdown. And issues, you must have noticed this. You must have noticed that as you've been locked in at home, perhaps homeschooling children, you find your tempers flaring, you're watching more television, you're trying to escape more frequently than you have in the past. And you don't know what to do with this pressure cooker of emotions. And can you honestly say that there hasn't been a single time that you haven't been triggered in the last 12 weeks? Surely there must have been a time that you've gotten triggered. So what I'd like you to do is just try something here. I want you to experientially, because that's what happens with the journey. It's experiential. I don't think anyone can tell you what your healing process is. Part of your healing journey is you uncover your own truth. You uncover your own cell memories. You go through a process of your own release, your own letting go, your own understanding, your own forgiveness, your own karmic lessons, your own life lessons, so that it doesn't show up down the line. I mean, I don't know if you know this, but there's 2 hospitals in Tel Aviv that are using this. One of them has a heart unit. So after you've undergone a heart operation, you undergone a week-long in the recovery center, where you actually go through the journey to get to the emotional corollary. They do the same in the cancer center in the other hospital, where after you've had your operations and whatever treatment is there, you then go through the emotional corollary to what is co-creating illness. And so, even on the CDC's website, it says 85% of all illness has an emotional basis. And so all of us have these emotional issues. All of us, I don't care how enlightened you may think you are, you have got cell memory stored inside of you where you didn't have a manual at that moment. You didn't know how to respond. You shut down, and it released the biochemistry, which has gone to certain cellular locations. And that emotion, that cell memory, that consciousness, the pain you went through is actually stored inside your body. And so you have to have been triggered at some point or another in the last 12 weeks. So what I'd like to invite you to do is to think of a time recently where you were just going through your day and boom, you found someone said something, someone did something, you heard something took place, and boom, up came some emotion which just got spewed out of you. So close your eyes for a moment and just open and let your awareness drift back over the last 12 weeks. And come to a specific moment where you know that you didn't respond in a wholesome and healthy way, that you got triggered and some emotion came up strongly for you. So welcome up that emotion right now. Go back to that specific time. Go back to, and just go to that exact memory of where and what was happening when you got triggered, and put it up onto a video screen for right now. So go to that memory. It may have been yesterday or the day before or a week before, whatever, to a memory where you got triggered. And in that memory, go to the moment where you got triggered, to that exact moment where it went, blah, where it just came out of you. And now roll the cameras back to that millisecond, to that impulse to just explode. Just roll the cameras back just to that impulse that arose inside before you just spewed it out. So go to that millisecond before, to that impulse, to just let it out. And now slow time down. Before the impulse, go to the moment before the impulse to explode and just open up and expand time and ask, what was I really feeling emotionally prior to that impulse to spew it out? Just stretch time and open up that moment before the impulse. What were you really feeling at that time? And open even deeper. And speak out loud into the room right now. What was the emotion that you were feeling that triggered the impulse and then triggered the explosion? What was the emotion that was there? What was that feeling? Say it out loud into your room. I found that when you just leave it inside your head, it stays there. It's important that it get out. So just speak out loud whatever the feeling is into your room right now. 1, 2, 3. And just opening with this feeling. Opening wide and getting real. And go deeper into the core of this feeling. And what were you really feeling at a deeper level? What were you feeling at a deeper level? What was the deeper emotion that's in the core of that more surface emotion? And again, just open. You don't have to do anything with it. Just speak out loud what that feeling was. Just let it up and out, whatever it was. Just speak it out. 1, 2, 3. And taking a nice deep breath in now. Letting it out. And opening your eyes. And I really like to welcome you just to share. You spewed out and there was an impulse. And prior to that, there was a surface emotion. But when you open deeper into that surface emotion, what was the feeling that was there? What were the emotions that were driving that spewing out? That emotion that got triggered is from somewhere a long time ago, or maybe even not long ago. So what I'm going to ask you to do is right now to open your heart, your being, and just do a divine experiment here. This is not a journey process, but I'm wanting you to viscerally get it. That though it may seem like our external circumstances are causing it, they're not causing it. They're just a trigger that is activating a deeper emotion that's buried in your cells. So I'd like you to take a nice deep breath in right now, letting it out, closing your eyes. And once again, I'd like you to welcome that deeper emotion. Just allow it to come flooding, whatever that feeling was. Because you went to the moment in the last 12 weeks where somehow something erupted. You went to the impulse. And that moment before the impulse where you stretched time, you asked yourself, what was I feeling at that time? Emotionally, what was I feeling? And when you really spoke that out loud and opened with that feeling, and I asked, go into the core of it. What was deeper even than that surface emotion? And a deeper emotion arose. And so stay connected to that deeper emotion and just open with the question, when have I felt like this before? Allow the emotion to flood over you. When have you felt like this before? Look down at your feet. See what, if any, shoes you're wearing, what you're wearing on your legs, how old you feel yourself to be. When have you felt like this before? Are you inside the house, outside the house? And just let the whole spontaneous memory just give rise to itself. And for now, put it up onto a video screen and let it go blank. Just welcoming the full power of that emotion and asking, when have I felt like this before? And let your awareness drift back to an earlier time. Look down at your feet. See what, if any, shoes you're wearing. What are you wearing on your legs? How old do you feel yourself? Who's in the scene with you? You inside, outside. Letting it all arise to be put onto the video screen. And now let your awareness drift back to an even earlier time, even earlier than this original memory that just came up, where this emotion that you were feeling was strongly here. And again, welcome the emotion and ask yourself, when have I felt like this before? Look down at your feet. See what, if any, shoes you're wearing. What are you wearing on your body? How old do you feel yourself to be? Who else is in the scene with you? Are you inside, outside? For some of us, these emotions have been with us since birth, or even were there with us in the womb. For some of us, we even brought them in with us. So let's take a nice deep breath in, letting it out, and opening your eyes. And if you're absolutely truthful with yourself and extremely open with yourself, you'll realize that this emotion that erupted now is actually tied to earlier times where you felt that emotion and to an even earlier time. And this is what the journey does in a very practical way. It takes you on a journey inside your body to get access to these buried cell memories, these buried emotions, this buried programming, negative beliefs and shutdowns that you've had, and to go through quite an open and real and honest process of release and letting go, forgiveness, so that when new cells are born, they're born devoid of that old consciousness. And in these days and age, it's my feeling that you can't afford to keep covering up all of what's stored inside of you. You know, life is conspired to trigger all of us. We're all pent up and our emotions are erupting. And for the first time in 26 years, even though I've been live streaming since there ever was a live stream platform, since 2011, we were one of the forerunners who started live streaming events online. And yet, the one event I wasn't willing to do online was our signature program, the Journey Intensive. And part of the reason for that was because part of the whole ethos of the journey is we have immense support for you. Immense support from practitioners and trainers. Practitioners who've gone through a year-long training and completed 44 case studies, who have a depth of experience to hold the embrace for you. And I wanted people to have the kind of powerful embrace where you could be embraced while you're going through a process. If you, and we, you know, up until this time, the platforms weren't available to allow you to go into a private room, meet up with a partner of your own choosing, and go through your journey process work. There's this very profoundly liberating work, and have the kind of embrace, the kind of trainer support and a co-presenter support that I would want you to have, where if you could be in the middle of a process and you say, I need help, and you click that on, and the trainer who's in charge of your pod of people will be there to support you, there to hold your hand through this deep and liberating work. And so I want to share with you what's going to happen, because for the first time in 26 years, we were able to find a platform, and I was able to record both live and recorded process work teachings in conjunction with a co-presenter who live will start eliciting with you and taking you through guided introspections through process work. And so the way it unfolds is this. You have 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. It goes from 9 until 6:30, both days. And it is a deep immersion. And I wanted it to be the same deep immersion with the extraordinary presence and with the support of being in the collective, and yet the personal support from trainers and a co-presenter that you get in a live seminar, and to really experiencing this liberating work. And so you will have time where you're going through teachings, times where you're being elicited and guided introspection with your live co-host. You'll be having time for lunch hour, and then you'll be meeting after lunch, and you'll be partnering with a partner of your own choosing who you will get to choose prior to going into the event, and go through integration and have the trainer support. And the truth of the matter is, I'm hugely proud of this product. And it couldn't have happened except because this time of lockdown called forth, and it allowed us to investigate and find platforms that will allow this kind of huge participatory interactive seminar, so you can feel like you're at a live journey event even while you're in your own room. If ever there was a time, it's now. And my prayer is not that you just have this hugely healing and liberating time, but that you get the skills and the tools so completely that you can use them with your kids, use them with your parents, use them on yourself with multiple issues. It's not just for a huge clearing over a 2-day period, and that's the end of it. It's so that you have these powerful, life-changing skills to use ongoingly in your life during a time that, more than any other time in history, we have needed these healing tools. And most of all, what I pray with the Journey Intensive is you come home to being at home in your own skin, that you feel at peace, that you come to a place of wholeness, to an understanding, and that you fall in love with the truth of who you are, with the love that's here, the freedom that is your essence.